The sun rose over the quiet village, painting the fields in soft shades of gold and pink. It was a simple place, where everyone knew their neighbors and the day's work was done by the strength of one's own two hands. In a small farmhouse at the edge of the village, a young woman named Elara was already awake. The scent of yeast and flour filled the air as she began her morning ritual of baking bread. She was 19 years old, with a gentle spirit and a heart that trusted easily. Her hands, though dusted with flour, moved with a practiced grace, kneading the dough that would feed her family for the day. Just beyond the fence that separated their land, she could see Liam, the young man she loved, beginning his own chores. He was 20, with a friendly smile, but a will that was often as soft as the spring mud. From the time they were children playing in the very fields they now worked, Elara and Liam had been inseparable. They had shared dreams under the wide open sky, dreams of one day joining their two farms into one, of building a life and a family together. It was always understood between them, a quiet promise that needed no grand words. Elara held this promise close to her heart, as real and as solid as the earth beneath her feet. She believed in their future with every part of her being, imagining a long life filled with shared sunrises and the happy noise of children. Her faith was a quiet, steady flame inside her, and she trusted that God had woven their paths together for a purpose. On this particular morning, Elara felt a special happiness. She had saved the last of the honey from the summer to sweeten the loaf she was making, a special gift just for Liam. She hummed a soft tune as she worked, her thoughts drifting to the future. She pictured a small wedding in the village church, a simple dress, and Liam waiting for her at the end of the aisle. She dreamed of a home filled with love and the smell of fresh bread, a place where they would grow old together. The dream was so vivid, so warm, that it made the simple kitchen feel like a palace. Later that day, as Elara was sweeping the front step, a stranger rode into the village. He was a man named Rafe, and he moved with a stillness that set him apart from the busy farmers. He was older, perhaps 28, and his eyes seemed to notice everything while giving away very little of his own thoughts. He dismounted his horse at the local inn, his simple but well-made clothes suggesting a life from the city, a world away from their small community. The village was abuzz with whispers about the quiet stranger, but Rafe paid no mind to the gossip. He simply went about his business, a solitary figure in the midst of their familiar lives. Elara, curious but shy, only saw him from a distance. She thought little of him, for her mind and heart were full of Liam. The next afternoon, Liam came to visit, but his usual cheerful smile was missing. His shoulders were slumped, and he could not meet her eyes. A cold dread, sharp and sudden, began to creep into Elara's heart. "What is wrong, Liam?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. He shuffled his feet, staring at the ground as if the words were written there. He explained that his family had been speaking to him. They had found a better match, the daughter of a man who owned much more land than Elara's family. They told him it was a smarter choice, a way to secure a more prosperous future. Elara listened, her world beginning to crack and splinter apart. The promises he had made, the dreams they had built, seemed to crumble into dust with every word he spoke. "But we love each other," she said, her voice trembling. Liam shook his head, his face filled with a miserable shame. "It is not enough," he mumbled. "My family says it is not enough. It is for the best." With those final, hollow words, he turned and walked away, leaving her standing alone in the doorway of her kitchen. The man she had trusted with her whole future was gone, and he had taken all her tomorrows with him. For a long moment, Elara stood frozen, the weight of his rejection pressing down on her like a physical force. Then, as if her legs could no longer hold her, she stumbled back into the kitchen. Her eyes fell upon the special loaf of honey bread, still warm from the oven, made with so much love and hope. The sight of it broke her completely. A sob escaped her lips, and then another, until she was crying in great, heaving gasps. She collapsed onto a wooden stool by the large kitchen table, burying her face in her flour-dusted hands. Her tears fell freely, a river of sorrow for a lost love and a broken future. She cried for the wedding that would never happen, for the children who would never be born, for the long, lonely life that now stretched out before her. The warm, safe kitchen had become a place of immense pain. Unseen by Elara, the stranger, Rafe, was standing just outside the open window. He had come to purchase bread, as the innkeeper had spoken highly of Elara's skill. He had witnessed the entire exchange between her and the young man. He saw Liam's hurried departure and the look of utter defeat on his face. And then, through the window, he saw Elara's shoulders shake with the force of her grief. He saw the genuine, profound pain of a good heart being shattered. He did not move or make a sound, but his own heart was moved by her suffering. He saw not just a sad girl, but a woman of strength and love being treated as if she were worthless. The following morning, as Elara tried to go about her chores with a heavy heart, Rafe approached her. He did not come too close, respecting her space. His voice was low and calm, not threatening, but filled with a certainty that was impossible to ignore. "I was passing by yesterday," he said gently. "I saw that you were sad." Elara looked up, surprised and a little embarrassed that her private moment had been witnessed. She tried to brush it away, but he continued. "I do not know who hurt you," Rafe said, his eyes holding hers with a strange kindness, "but if a man caused those tears, then he is already gone from your future. A man who is foolish enough to break something so precious does not deserve a place in your story." He did not wait for a reply, simply nodding his head slightly before walking away, leaving Elara alone with his unexpected words. His statement was not a comfort offered in pity, but a simple, powerful truth. It settled in the room after he left, quieting the echoes of her sobs. The words, "He is already gone," began to work in her heart. They did not take away the pain, but they planted a small, fragile seed of something new. The idea that this ending was not the final chapter of her life. The man who had broken her trust had removed himself from her path, and perhaps, just perhaps, that path was not closed, but was now clearing the way for something, or someone, better. The kitchen, once a place of shattered dreams, now held a whisper of a different kind of hope, one built not on a boy's weak promise, but on the unshakable truth that she was worth far more. The days that followed Liam's departure were long and grey for Elara, each one stretching out like a shadow at dusk. The simple routines of her life, once filled with quiet joy, now felt heavy and hollow. Kneading the bread dough brought no comfort, and the sight of the neighboring farm where Liam worked was a constant, painful reminder of all she had lost. She moved through her chores like a ghost in her own home, her smile absent and her heart wrapped in a shroud of sorrow. The village, so small and interconnected, seemed to hum with the news of her rejection, and she felt the weight of every sympathetic glance and hushed whisper. She spent many hours in prayer, not asking for her old life back, but for the strength to bear the one she now had, clinging to her faith as the only solid ground in a world that had suddenly turned to shifting sand. It was during this time of quiet suffering that Rafe began to appear more regularly at her family's gate. His visits were never announced and always brief, conducted with a formality that felt both old-fashioned and deeply respectful. He would arrive not with empty words of comfort, but with a practical reason for his presence. He came to buy 2 loaves of bread, inquiring politely about the different grains she used. Another day, he asked for directions to a nearby stream, claiming a need for fresh water for his horse. On a third occasion, he simply stood at the fence and remarked on the health of her family's vegetable garden, his observations sharp and knowledgeable. He never once mentioned seeing her cry, nor did he speak directly of her heartbreak, yet his presence seemed to acknowledge it in a way that was not intrusive, but strangely comforting. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, these small encounters began to lengthen. A question about bread would lead to a discussion about the harvest, and a comment on the weather would turn into a conversation about the changing seasons. They discovered a shared surprise that they both attended the same small village church, though they sat in different pews. One afternoon, as a gentle rain began to fall, Rafe did not immediately leave. Instead, he stood under the shelter of the large oak tree near her house, and they found themselves talking about the sermon from the previous Sunday, about forgiveness and new beginnings. Elara, who had felt so alone, found herself speaking more than she had in weeks, her words finding a patient and attentive listener in the quiet stranger. Their growing friendship was a gentle, gradual warmth, like the slow rising of the sun after a cold night. It was built on a foundation of shared values and mutual respect, a stark contrast to the whirlwind of her childhood dreams with Liam. Rafe was a man of his word, and his actions were always consistent and honorable. He listened more than he spoke, and when he did speak, his words were thoughtful and carried the weight of genuine conviction. He spoke of his own faith not as a habit, but as the central pillar of his life, the compass that guided all his decisions. This deep and steady belief resonated with the core of who Elara was, mending a part of her spirit that had been fractured by faithlessness. Meanwhile, the life Liam had chosen was unfolding with a stark and unhappy clarity. His engagement to the daughter of the wealthy landowner was a cold and businesslike arrangement. There were no shared laughs, no soft words, no dreams whispered under the stars. He was met with demands and expectations, his every move judged for its financial benefit. He would often see Elara from a distance, noticing a new lightness in her step as she spoke with Rafe, and a profound regret began to gnaw at him. The better future his family had promised felt like a gilded cage, and he realized too late that he had traded a genuine treasure for a hollow imitation. One evening, as Elara was returning from the village well, Liam approached her, his face a mask of misery and shame. "Elara," he began, his voice choked, "I was wrong. I made a terrible mistake. My life is empty without you. Please, can you ever find it in your heart to forgive me? Can we go back to how we were?" He poured out his regrets, his words tumbling over one another in a desperate plea. Elara listened quietly, allowing him to finish. She felt a pang of sadness for the boy she had once loved, but no longing for the man he had become. When he was done, she looked at him, her eyes clear and steady, no longer clouded by tears. "You broke a promise that was made with love, Liam," she said, her voice soft but firm. "You taught me that some paths, once left, cannot be walked again. My heart is no longer yours to keep." She turned and walked towards her home, not with anger, but with a final, peaceful closure. This newfound strength in Elara did not go unnoticed by Rafe. He saw in her not a wounded girl to be rescued, but a woman of immense character and resilience. His respect for her deepened into a profound and growing affection. Following the traditions of their time and his own unwavering principles, he put on his best coat one afternoon and went to speak with Elara's father. He stood straight and looked the older man in the eye, asking for his formal permission to court Elara with the honorable intention of marriage. It was a gesture that spoke volumes about his character, showing he valued her family and her reputation. Her father, who had seen the positive change Rafe had inspired in his daughter, gave his glad and hearty approval. Their courtship was a beautiful and deliberate dance, conducted with patience and deep respect. They spent their time together in ways that nurtured their souls and strengthened their bond. They took long walks along the country lanes, discussing their hopes and their faith. They sat on the front porch in the evenings, sharing stories from their pasts. They attended church together every Sunday, their shared belief forming the unshakable bedrock of their relationship. He never once pressured her, never stepped beyond the bounds of propriety. He was building a partnership, a friendship that was destined to become the foundation for a lifetime. He was teaching her, through his every action, what it truly meant to be cherished and protected. A full year passed in this manner, a year of healing, growth, and deepening love. The seasons turned, and with them, Elara's heart blossomed fully once more, this time with a wiser, more mature love. One crisp autumn day, Rafe led her to the big oak tree where they had shared their first real conversation about faith and new beginnings. The leaves were a brilliant canopy of gold and red above them. He took her hands in his usual quiet strength softened by a visible tenderness. He spoke of the day he first saw her, of the journey their hearts had taken, and of his love for her, which had become the center of his world. Then, he knelt down on one knee on the soft earth and asked her to be his wife. Elara's answer was a joyful yes, filled with none of the naive fantasy of her youth, but with the solid, certain knowledge that she was choosing a man who would walk beside her in faith, always. Their wedding was held in the small village church that had been the witness to both her sorrow and her healing. It was not a grand affair, but it was filled with a profound and genuine happiness. Surrounded by their family and friends, under the gentle light filtering through the stained glass windows, Elara and Rafe pledged their lives to one another. They promised to love and to cherish, for better or for worse, in sickness and in health, until death alone would part them. They made these vows not just to each other, but before God, placing their future union firmly in His hands. As they walked back down the aisle as husband and wife, the community saw not just a new couple, but the beautiful, God-ordained beginning of a family built on a foundation of rock, not sand. The small house that Rafe had built with his own hands sat nestled in a sunlit corner of the village, its wooden walls holding within them a peace that was almost tangible. For Elara, waking within its rooms each morning was a quiet miracle. The memory of the kitchen where her heart had broken was now a distant, faded picture, replaced by the vibrant reality of a home filled with mutual respect and a deep, abiding love. Her days were no longer solitary. They were a partnership, a shared life where even the simplest chore, like preparing a meal, was a joy when done for Rafe. He, in turn, worked his land with a renewed purpose, each furrow plowed and each seed sown representing a future he was building for the woman he adored. Their life was a gentle rhythm of work, prayer, and companionship, a melody so sweet and steady that it seemed to make the very air around their home hum with contentment. Their happiness was a private world, one they cherished and protected. They spent their evenings reading together by the firelight, or simply sitting in a comfortable silence on their porch, watching the stars emerge one by one in the vast, dark sky. Their love was not a frantic, fleeting emotion, but something that had grown slowly and surely, like a great oak tree, its roots now sunk deep into the rich soil of shared faith and unwavering commitment. They spoke often of their gratitude, acknowledging in their nightly prayers the mysterious and painful path that had ultimately led them to one another. Elara's heart, once so scarred by betrayal, now felt whole and safe, encased in the fortress of Rafe's steadfast devotion. Then, one spring morning, a new and wondrous layer was added to their joy. Elara discovered that she was to have a child. The news filled their small home with a light that seemed brighter than the sun. Rafe's usual calm demeanor broke into a smile of such profound happiness that it brought fresh tears to Elara's eyes, this time tears of pure, untainted joy. They saw this new life not as a simple event of nature, but as a sacred blessing, a gift from God entrusted to their care. Their prayers of gratitude became prayers for guidance, asking for wisdom to be good and faithful parents. Together, they began to prepare for the baby's arrival, their efforts a physical expression of their hope and love. Elara's hands, so skilled at kneading bread, now turned to sewing. She worked on tiny garments, each stitch a whispered prayer. She crafted little gowns from the softest cotton, their size so small they could fit a doll. She knitted tiny socks no bigger than her thumb, and delicate caps to keep the baby's head warm. Rafe, with his careful hands, carved a cradle from a single piece of oak, sanding the wood until it was as smooth as silk. He placed it near their bed, a tangible promise of the new life that would soon join their family. The entire village watched this quiet preparation with a sense of shared anticipation, seeing in this expectant couple a living testament to the rewards of patience and virtue. The day the baby decided to arrive was a long and difficult one. The sun rose and set while Elara labored, her cries of pain echoing in the small bedroom where the village midwife worked tirelessly. Rafe was not permitted in the room, a custom of the time, but he remained just outside the closed door, his forehead pressed against the cool wood. He did not pace or fret outwardly, but stood as still as a statue, his entire being focused on fervent, silent prayer. He prayed for strength for Elara, for the safety of the child, and for the skill of the midwife. Inside, Elara clung to her faith through the waves of pain, holding on to the belief that God would see her through this trial, just as he had seen her through the trial of a broken heart. Then, as the first light of a new day began to tint the horizon, a new sound filled the house. It was the strong, healthy cry of a newborn. The midwife opened the door, her tired face breaking into a wide smile. Rafe entered the room, his heart pounding with a mixture of fear and overwhelming love. He saw Elara, pale and exhausted, but her face was radiant, lit from within by a mother's triumphant love. In her arms, swaddled in one of the tiny gowns she had sewn, was their daughter. The midwife handed the small bundle to Rafe, and he cradled his child for the first time. She was impossibly small and perfect, with a faint dusting of dark hair on her head. He then carefully placed the baby, their daughter, into Elara's waiting arms. Looking down at the tiny, sleeping face of their child, a profound sense of completion settled over Elara. In that sacred moment, her mind traveled back, not with pain, but with a strange sense of clarity, to the day she had wept in her old kitchen. She saw the shattered pieces of her first dream, and she saw the hand of God, like that of a master craftsman, gathering those pieces and creating a new, more beautiful mosaic. The heartbreak had not been a punishment, it had been a preparation. It had cleared the way for Rafe, a man of substance and faith, a man who was a true partner and protector. It had led her to this exact moment, to this child, to this forever after that was more real and more glorious than any dream she had ever dared to imagine. Rafe sat on the edge of the bed, his arm around Elara's shoulders, his other hand gently touching his daughter's tiny fist. "My greatest treasure," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion, and Elara knew he was speaking of both her and the baby. They were his world, and he was theirs. The story of Elara and Rafe shows us that the greatest loves are often born from the greatest pains, and that by holding on to faith and choosing the path of patience and honor, a happiness beyond all imagining can be found. Their story did not end, but truly began, in that quiet room, with the dawn of a new day and the promise of a love that would last forever. If this story of faith, redemption, and a love built on respect has touched your heart, there are many more tales like it waiting to be discovered. We invite you to join our community of listeners who cherish stories of hope and forever endings. By subscribing to our channel, you ensure you will not miss the next beautiful journey. Subscribe now, and let us continue to explore the power of faith and love together.